All right, so let's get into it. When I say the 1970s, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Probably disco, right? Maybe some seriously wide bell-bottoms? Well, today we're going to peel back all that glitter and dive into one of the most turbulent and honestly most transformative decades in American history. So on one hand, you've got that pop culture image we all know, the music, the fashion, the parties, but the real story of the 70s, the one that truly changed America, was all about disruption. We're talking about an era defined by a massive political scandal, powerful social protests, and a crippling energy crisis that literally changed how every American lived their daily life.
And this incredible turmoil really started right at the very top, with a scandal that would completely shatter the nation's trust in its leaders for a generation to come.
What's so wild is how fast this whole thing unraveled. It all kicked off in June 1972 with what everyone at first called a third-rate burglary at the DNC headquarters. But over the next 2 years, thanks to televised hearings that had the entire country glued to their screens, this story just exploded. It exposed a massive cover-up and huge abuses of power, leading to the Supreme Court demanding Nixon release his secret tapes. And then, by August 1974, the unthinkable happened. A U.S. president resigned from office. For the first time in American history.
The fallout from this was just immense. I mean, Watergate wasn't just some political event. It left a permanent scar on the American psyche. It created this deep, cynical mistrust between the people and their government that totally changed our politics. You can literally draw a straight line from that moment to the kind of investigative journalism and political skepticism we see all the time today.
So while all of Washington was just consumed by this scandal, a completely different kind of power was rising up from the ground level. Citizens, feeling unheard and totally disenfranchised, started to organize and demand their rights in ways that would fundamentally reshape the country. And let's look at how this all played out. As that trust in the old institutions just crumbled, people started building power for themselves. 3 major social movements, in particular, gained incredible momentum during this decade, and each one of them challenged the status quo and pushed for a more inclusive America.
So in the fight for women's rights, one of the most powerful tools was new legislation, like Title IX. This law had a massive real-world impact. By banning sex-based discrimination in any school that got federal money, it didn't just transform women's sports, it laid the legal groundwork for all these ongoing debates about gender equity in schools and workplaces that are still so important today. The gay rights movement also just exploded in visibility and influence. Building on the powerful energy of the Stonewall uprising in 1969, activists in the 70s organized the very first Pride marches and began that long, tough fight against discriminatory laws. This was the decade the movement really went from the margins to the mainstream, building the foundation for the LGBTQ+ rights we've seen secured in recent years. And then you have this whole new environmental awareness. Suddenly, concern over pollution and the planet went mainstream, and it all came together in the very first Earth Day in 1970. And this wasn't just a one-day protest. It directly led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and it launched the modern environmental movement as we know it, which is the direct ancestor of today's urgent conversations about climate change. But okay, beyond the political scandals and the social protests, the decade was also defined by this deep and constant economic anxiety that really affected every single American household.
The big pressure point was energy. In 1973, an oil embargo by OPEC, that's the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries, sent absolute shockwaves through the U.S. economy. All of a sudden, there were serious fuel shortages, those famous long lines at the gas station, and prices that just kept going up and up. It made Americans feel vulnerable in a way they never had before.
But scarcity often forces creativity. That energy crisis, as tough as it was, also sparked this wave of innovation that we're still feeling today. It pushed America to really think about fuel efficiency and alternative energy for the first time on a huge scale. It planted the seeds for the solar panels, the wind turbines, and the electric vehicles that are so central to our energy strategy now. And the decade's economic and international struggles were really capped by the Iran hostage crisis. For 444 agonizing days, the whole nation just watched as American hostages were held in Iran. This diplomatic standoff completely dominated the news, and it became a symbol of America's perceived weakness on the world stage, setting us up for decades of complicated, often hostile relations with Iran that still shape geopolitics. So what's the big takeaway here? The crucial point is that this decade of struggle didn't just fade away when the disco music stopped. It left a permanent and pretty complex mark on the nation.
When you put it all together, the legacy is crystal clear. The 70s wasn't just an ending, it was really a beginning. That loss of political innocence fueled a whole new era of citizen activism. The social movements of the decade laid the groundwork for today's ongoing fights for equality. The energy crisis kicked off the conversation about sustainability that now defines our future. In almost every way, the 70s set the agenda for the next 50 years.
It was just a decade of intense contradiction and disruption that forced America to confront some really hard truths about its government, its society, and its limits in the world. The 70s may be over, but its aftershocks, they're definitely not. So the real question to think about is this: when you look at our world today, which consequences of the 1970s do you think we are feeling the most?